Welcome to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is creating unity through music, but as I like to say, making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace. And today I am still in Studio One of the worldwide headquarters of the Planetary Gig Society. I've been here for quite some time in the pandemic, but very, very thrilled and excited to be able to talk by Zoom all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to the Netherlands, and with a great musician, singer, and she's doing so many good things, which she'll tell you about, Vivienne Aerts. Vivienne, how you doing?
Good. So happy to be here. This is awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And you are in Amsterdam?
The place at the city of Leiden. It's south of Amsterdam, just half an hour south, and it's the birthplace of Rembrandt, the famous painter. And we have those little canals, and in the center of the city there's a citadel, and our house is built in, they say, 1750. So there's so much history. We have stained glass and old brick walls, and yeah, we love the history of it. But normally, I'm based in New York. But I was here for a gig, and I'm from here, and then borders closed, and it felt better to just wait it out in our house here than in Brooklyn. But we'll be back.
I think that was a good decision, because the United States is not really doing so well with the pandemic response.
Well,
it's very
Corona
sad.
is everywhere, though.
Yeah, it's everywhere,
And
but it's, I don't know. I guess I learned about you because you coordinate the Kenny Werner's Effortless Mastery courses at Berkeley College, and we can certainly talk about that, but perhaps you could just start from the beginning a bit. It doesn't have to be like a whole long autobiography, but
Okay.
Where were you from? Was music in your family? Did your parents play music? How did you like to sing as a child? Did you take courses? And how did you end up, in this trajectory? You're from there, you're living in New York, now you're moderating this kind of global music forum. Tell us about it. I'm just really anxious to hear about that, your history with this.
Yeah. I was born and raised in the Netherlands. My parents still live very close to my city, in a place called Zoetermeer. I went to study conservatory at the same time as at the University for Psychology. I was always very into music. I started playing piano when I was like 5 or so, and I was accompanying myself on the piano while singing songs and composing songs that I wrote. So then, I went to the conservatory for singing.
Even when you were young, like 5, 10?
Very young, And my parents, they went to church, and then there was no church piano player, so it was me. Eventually, when I was 12, I became the pianist of the church.
Wow.
Every Sunday I was there. It was nice. It was great. Learned a lot of songs and, reading music. Sight reading, I had to do a lot of sight reading and choir type of reading. So then, I really wanted to get into more jazz singing or composing. Mm-hmm. So I went to the Conservatory of The Hague. And at the same time, I applied for the University of Leiden to do my Bachelor of Psychology. And that went on, and then I did my master in clinical psychology in Leiden as well, and I graduated as a choir conductor in the Conservatory of Haarlem.
Wow.
So then in the daytime, I worked as a therapist in a private practice for people with issues ranging from burnout to anxiety, to even did like couples treatment. And in the night, I was a choir conductor and of 5 choirs, as well as a performer with like a jazz trio and a quartet. And I performed my own songs as well. So then I felt, I was sort of still not ready for the world, even though I was working all the time, like really all the time. So I one of the summers, years before that, I got a scholarship from Berkeley during that a workshop that they do in Italy called Umbria Jazz. This festival is like a 2-week, it's my favorite, it's like a 2-week thing where every night there's jazz in the whole city, and it's on the street and in the all the different venues in Perugia, in the middle of Italy, and the weather is great and the food is great, and then Berkeley goes there to teach. Generally, so in the daytime you go to the Berkeley teachers and have like a summer course, and in the night you go to all these concerts that are because of the festival. So I won that year. That was in 2007, because I had so much fun. I was one of the chosen to get this scholarship, but I was still studying in the Netherlands. I still had to finish everything I was doing, so I couldn't go right away. So years later, I called Berkeley. I say, well, now I'm finally done. I got my master's in clinical psychology. I've been working as a shrink, and I'm a conductor. Can I still go? And they were like, oh yeah, just come.
Cool.
So in 2012, I gave everything up here in the Netherlands, and I went. I was able to fund it through CD sales, because I had I had one, and I just produced my second just before I went to Boston, but that wasn't out. But I sold my first CD so many times that and then in addition to different type of scholarships, I was able to fund the whole journey.
Great.
And I went to Berkeley for 3 years, starting in 2012.
And then took piano and voice, or?
Majoring voice, and a lot of composition classes, improvisation classes. I got into the global jazz program, where we got exposed weekly, but to like giant, like super famous jazz people like Joe Lovano, Dave Liebman, John Patitucci. We got to work with all these.
Wow.
Brian Blade, Victor Wooten, Terry Lynn Carrington, like all of them. It was really beyond anything I could have imagined. So it was like a giant candy store. Berkeley is big. They have 5,000 students. They have a lot of buildings. They have concert rooms. You can sort of, it's really like a candy store. So I did browse around like that for 3 years, and then graduated. In my last semester, though, I met Kenny, and I only had one class, and the rest was like empty space. So I'm like, oh, I'm hanging with Kenny, because he didn't really have a plan either. He got hired as the director of the Performance Wellness Institute.
Wow.
It sort of existed. It was a commingle between the teachers of yoga, body mapping, Alexander technique, and Tai Chi. And they would meet like twice a year or maybe more and discuss the wellness and the health of students and how they could just help each other and the students. So now Kenny became the head of them, sort of. And they just gave him no formal classes, but just time to browse around the school. But it's a big school, so I started building a newsletter within the school, and after that semester, we had a Facebook group, and things started rolling. So they managed to, after I graduated, to just keep me on. And it's been like 6 years now. By now, we have an official Effortless Mastery course.
Yes.
Part 1 and part 2, so you can take it for credit. You can study about his book and the steps described in that book, and you can take an Effortless Mastery ensemble. Then you can also take a whole minor where you add the classes of like somatic disciplines like yoga and tai chi. You add those into the mix, and in addition to all those classes, we make him available to the whole school. But in the meantime, I was still like, oh, I am a performer, so I need to develop a new album. And I moved to New York after graduating. And my husband is from the Netherlands. He came to New York as well. He had been missing me when I was in Boston, but from New York he joined, and he started to work in a very famous restaurant, which has 3 Michelin stars. And during that year, they became the best restaurant of the world.
Wow.
So he was working for 80 hours a week in our first year of New York. And I was 80 hours in the jazz clubs. And he would call at 3 a.m. and say, hey, where are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm in Smiles or in Fat Cat. And please bring some cookies. They'll love it here. So he was just, we were just hanging out all the time in those moments that we were able to, because it was just hard work that first year. And we thought we would just go back to Europe, because 1 year there's all these visa complications normally. But after 1 year, it was just like, wow, this is actually fun, and I think we could do it. So I extended my visa, and we just stayed on the artist visa. So I performed with Kenny in the Blue Note, and we had shows in Washington, and we did with Kenny, we do a lot of improvisational experimental music where I don't sing lyrics really. Mm-hmm. I don't really call it scatting, because it's really just whatever happens. Mm. In Boston, we play a lot with Rakalam Bob Moses, which is a drummer, and he's amazing. You should really check him out. And
I find myself just saying "wow" to almost everything that you're saying. It's wow, amazing. So, let's talk a little bit about the Effortless Mastery, if you don't mind, because Victor Wooten had a couple of virtual camps, in the spring, mm-hmm. May, June, something like that. And somebody mentioned the Effortless Mastery book, and I had not really heard of it, but it's really a special and profound book. I think he wrote it in about 98 or so. So it's been around.
Yeah, 22 years ago.
Yeah. And it had a similar effect as when somebody told me about Victor Wooten's book, The Music Lesson, and it's like, wow. Mm-hmm. And Kenny's book is so similar in many, it's not a similar book, but there's many similar concepts, no wrong notes.
There are, yeah.
That sort of thing. And it really is mind expanding to think about things this way, and not just for music, but for life. And so how would you describe
Effortless Mastery?
Effortless Mastery, what it means to musicians, what it can mean more broadly. I mean, you're having these ongoing sort of discussions now online, which are fabulous. So
he wrote this book 20 years ago, and it came from all the experiences he had. So the beginning of the book is just an introduction in all the mind things we get ourselves in, stuff that gets into the way of the natural flow of the music, fears that we have, why don't we practice, or why do we feel bad for not practicing enough? Why do we have a certain type of pains because we over practice? So he's just describing that, they did some research actually recently that 90% of people that go to music schools all over the world, not just Berkeley, 90% suffers either mental or physical pain because they don't feel good enough.
Wow.
Or they practice wrong and they get like physical pains. So 90% has a mental or physical issue. So, Berkeley is smart to address it. But so Kenny wrote this book 20 years ago. And in the end of the last few chapters of the book, he's describing 4 steps. How to become, well, the basic premise is if you want to become a master, it needs to be effortless. The journey of that is probably not effortless. But just like we eat soup, we never miss our spoon, or we can walk and talk.
I do sometimes, but no, just kidding.
But a kid of 2, a 2-year-old will spill soup all over your floor. Right. So you became a master in eating soup more than the kid. So anything we do, we can train ourselves to become a master in it. And we've done that with certain type of things. But with music, all of a sudden, we just scratch the surface. So first we have to learn about the space, as he calls it, where things are effortless, where you're not trying to manage it, and the music plays itself. And you can just discover that with one note. So instead of managing the note, you can just let the note appear and let your body play the instrument. So by starting to discover, as he calls this, the space, you can develop a longer period of being in the space. And then you can move around the instrument from that space. Then in step 3 and 4, you can adapt new information and notice where you're not in the space yet, because you've studied the space in step 1 and step 3. So you'll study something so deep in step 4 until it plays itself.
It's very profound. You were talking about the soup, and I think about walking. I go on these walks in the morning and down by the river, and in the pandemic.
You're not managing your walk.
Yeah, but I don't think about, okay, now move your right foot. Okay, now move your left foot. Okay, whoops, that was too short of a step. Watch out. And it makes sense about being effortless. And some of the time I've spent with in the Victor Wooten camps, and people are always saying, I just want to get out of my own way. I want to get out of my head and just be able to play. And it's such a goal, but it is sort of hard. I didn't come to music until pretty late. I picked up harmonica maybe 20 years ago, and guitar really only, I've been focusing on it for maybe 6 years. But it's so amazing. It's so, in some ways, easy and simple, and in some ways incredibly complex. And what else would you say about effortless mastery in terms of, or for musicians, but also for, you're a psychologist, right?
Right. Well, effortless mastery is learning to, having the instrument play itself, making sure your mind stays out of the way. And in general, with any creative profession, you want that. You want to create not from fear, or from you have an empty page and you're like, ooh, this needs to, you're supposed to write a poem or a composition, or you need to make a drawing, and ooh, this needs to be a good drawing. This empty page, nobody ever apparently tries to compose a bad piece of music, as Kenny Werner saying that.
Right.
Did you ever try to write a bad piece of music? So training your mind to stay in the now instead of the future or the past, or getting into the way of that flow, and just learning to trust yourself and your own creativity and your skills. Trusting your hands to play your instrument because you've done that for a certain amount of time. That's very valuable. And in a way, it's mindfulness.
When you say
in the now.
Being in the now, the now is
In the
certainly
space.
something I've sort of studied for a while. The power of now, Eckhart
Right.
Tolle, and that sort of thing. I heard Jake Shimabukuro, who plays ukulele, talking about, well, he used to think of Michael Jordan as, he'd get in the zone, and he thought it was really about Michael Jordan being so focused that he was good. But Jake said, I realized it was more about him just being in the now and having awareness of everything instead. And
Right.
I guess if you're playing music effortlessly as sort of a master, you can just play the song and be watching somebody over there and thinking about this, and
You're watching yourself play.
Yeah.
So then you have these outer body experience, which I had, and more, you're just watching yourself play. And then afterwards, I generally have no clue what I did. I just know it was fine.
Yeah.
Well, you cannot start with the whole song. You have to start small. You have to start with one note or two notes, where you just let go and just make the sound. Just move the hand onto the piano or onto the guitar and just play a note. And instead of managing it, you don't. And then just focus on your breath and on the space or on the flow or whatever word you want to give it.
So
You have to start small.
Yeah.
It's a cognitive exercise.
So obviously you've been sort of practicing this, and you've can watch yourself. Have you seen it with other people, the students? I mean, people who've taken Kenny's class.
Yeah, very much.
What have people found? Or
Well, we had people that make one sound and start crying because it's such a relief to finally just open up. But then the whole issue is, how do I do it again? And how do I continue to grow and create more of that space and more of that sound?
Mm-hmm.
That's the hard part. Because everybody has, most people they remember moments in their life where they just let go and have the ultimate experience of music or art. And those moments you still remember. But how do you create those?
Yeah.
Without actually wanting to create, because the desire to create those will only get into the way of letting go. Because you're holding on to the so it's a cognitive exercise in letting go. And they can take many forms. You can do yoga at your instrument. You could do meditation. There's many ways. Effortless Mastery is certainly not the only way. What's new about Effortless Mastery is that all these mindful exercises happen at the instrument. You make a sound from that space.
Yeah, I have heard, again, at Victor's camps, Victor and Bob Franceschini and many of them talk about music being almost sort of like a separate entity. He talks about it in his book. And in talking with Bob Franceschini one time, he said sometimes when he's trying really hard and he thinks I did a great job and he doesn't feel so good, and other times he doesn't even remember what he played.
Right.
It's just you're just doing it. It's almost like you're being played in a sense.
Yeah, that's it.
So a lot of musicians, I think, would like to learn more about that. And I think, how does it really relate to life? We've talked about music, peace through music, and music being something that can help people, relax if they've had a hard day, or change their mood. Certainly in the pandemic, Friday or Saturday night, we crank some tunes up, and it's like, whew, okay, made it through that week.
Yeah.
People want more of that in their lives too, probably. Effortless, not afraid, not tense, just to be able to go with the flow.
Yeah. And we've forgotten in the Western world, I guess, that we can exercise effortlessness. Because if you get to your first piano lesson in life, you get a book and you have to make it from page 1 till page 25, or how many pages are in the book.
Yeah.
And it's very goal-oriented. It's not like the goal is to finish the book. The goal is not to be able to really master it.
Yeah.
And staying with one song for a year or however long it takes, it will require a lot of ego, because the ego will say, oh, I'm not fast enough. I don't get anywhere. The ego will say, I'm not good enough. And that will all get into the way of the flow of that song.
Of course, I guess you have to have, mastered some of the techniques in the playing so that you can do it. I mean, I've been working on a couple of guitar solos for, this one Lindsey Buckingham one for probably 2 years, and I'm still trying to just get that little part right, and it's getting better and better and easier and easier, but it does take work to get there.
You could either you could take the whole song and try to do it, or you can just play it from the space and see where you stumble, and then practice that bar that doesn't play itself yet.
Right.
That's more effective than just hoping you'll play it correctly this time around. Because there's a time for playing, and there's a time for practicing, and there's a time for performing, and there's a time for having dinner. There is a time for everything, and we shouldn't confuse ourselves with, we're trying to practice something and all of a sudden we're just playing a song. We're not practicing it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And playing it is fun, so you should totally do that. But then don't get frustrated if it doesn't play itself yet. Then just dedicate some time to that one bar and just put your ego aside and say, oh, this bar doesn't play. I'll just, it just means that I haven't done it yet.
Yeah. So you have so many things going on, and like everybody, our lives have been put on hold. But you are continuing with, the virtual Effortless Mastery Institute courses. And where would you like things to go? Where do you think things will go in that way and in your career? But also, how can we take maybe these lessons from this time to maybe become a society that has more effortless mastery of not fighting each other or something? I don't know. What are your thoughts kind of for the future?
Well, that's a very wide question. Well, before Corona, I was working for Kenny and Berkeley and the Institute. But I also worked with my husband on giant shows that involve edible pastry and improvised music. So we created an experience where we really make a painting from dessert. And every movement that my husband made, throwing chocolate and cake and cream, every movement, I created a musical soundscape to it. So it was an improvisation with iPad apps and loop stations and synthesizers. I use a lot of my voice looped into choirs, all live created. And sometimes there's a whole band with me improvising along, or it's just a cello or a bass. And we've done shows for the last 5 years under the name Choco Jazz for Vool. And it was really amazing because all the effortless mastery techniques and stuff, my whole mindset I took with me into this show, because we're creating in the moment and we're giving the audience an experience. How does blue sound and how does red taste? And conceptual, we were really making art. It was not, it's not like, it's not pure entertainment. It's really an immersive experience that we wanted to give. And that really was so, I'm so thankful for those experiences, because we were so close to connected on stage, watching each other and responding, making sounds to whatever was happening. But for obvious reasons, that show is on a hold, because people cannot share food at the moment.
Yeah,
it's very close to each other.
Very cool.
Our biggest was 1,500 people audience.
Wow.
1,500. So they had to build a table especially for us. It was like 2 arm length wide and then 10 meters long. And then that one took an hour, but generally it's like 20 minutes, and then they get to eat it. So yeah, but I use a lot of like being in the space during those shows. So that was one thing I did. And then the other thing is, me as a performer with different type of groups. I play a lot with this electronic experimental trio, young guys, one on a Mahler synth and a guitar, in underground clubs in New York. And obviously with Kenny, I sang on his latest vinyl with Terrelyn Carrington, James Genius, Dave Liebman, and Kenny. And that was really amazing. So we had a show in Belgium on a festival at Middelheim Jazz, and we had the release in New York at the Jazz Standard, which is now, they announced that their New York Jazz Standard is closing. It's such a bummer. So yeah, those, being a performer will obviously, not happen anytime soon. And the chocolate dessert music shows will be on a hold. And I'm very happy that Berklee is continuing online, which is amazing. We have been so much more available to anybody in the school because we don't have to travel, and we can use all hours of the day. So when we went online in, I think it was March, I told Kenny, the weekly forum that we have, why not just open it for the wide public? So I just put it on Kenny's Facebook and his Instagram, and then people showed up. And normally he has a break in the summer because he goes on tour, but this year, there was no tours. So we just continued the forum, and more and more people that I get to know, they join and they ask questions, and it really feels like we have a community growing with the forums. And I hope to expand that, as well as in the future, we do need to think about creating a certification program for people then not to only take the classes with him, but also to become a teacher in Effortless Mastery. Because so far it's him and then me teaching Effortless Mastery in the world. But yeah, it'd be awesome if we can create a certification program. But in order to do that within the Berklee realm, we need funding, and there's a lot of paperwork and stuff that we need to sort out.
Well, it's also cool I just said when you were talking, I'd seen a couple of pictures on social media about the chocolate, but it's kind of a Jackson Pollock experience.
Right, it is.
And expanding.
But then edible.
Yeah, and expanding all that into different things, and it's kind of creating from the space.
Right.
I guess, isn't it?
I gave a speech in Mexico 3 years ago because I came to Boston on a Fulbright, so I'm also in the board of Fulbright New York alumni. So I was invited to speak at the National Fulbright Conference in Mexico in that was 2 years ago, and my topic was chocolate and music, and it was actually. There's all these Fulbrighters are amazing, and there's all different type of scientists, and it's really cool. So many different topics. So my speech was like a 10-minute type TED Talk type of thing, and it was about chocolate and music. And I started with some listening examples that I got from my show. So I just took like 20 seconds from a table that was red and yellow, and then or blue, and I asked the audience a multiple choice, what color do you think it is? And then the next question with a different sound sample was like, what emotion was this, or what movement was this? And they had to guess A, B, C, D, or I gave them a bunch of variations, and they could choose. And then the audience had to raise their hands all the time, voting for what they thought this sound sample meant to. And actually, it worked because they were actually agreeing with each other.
This is like group synesthesia.
Maybe.
Yeah,
it just means that I was right in creating what I did. But in general, people know what stuff means in music, but they don't define it yet because they just listen to it. Mm-hmm. But if you would ask them for it, they know a lot about music because it's in our DNA.
Yeah, and then everything is sort of connected. It's like,
Right.
Pitch is sped up rhythm, and if you speed that up faster, you get light. So, what does blue sound like is a kind of a real question.
Yeah, and people get like surprised by it, but it's just like algebra or so. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not so weird to ask, how does blue sound? And doing research, I mean, I've done a lot of research about, how does blue sound? Or what did Rembrandt eat or listen to? Or, what kind of colors can we use in Mondrian's type of, and why? And what other artists were using those colors? So there's a lot of connections with different art forms, and adding them all together like we do in our show, it only means that our audience is able to grasp what they were already thinking.
Yeah.
Because experimental music or improvisation or soundscapes, that generally has a very small audience, and it's very scary for people because they have no clue what they, jazz still is very like
exotic. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you bring chocolate into the mix, they are open to it. And they're like, oh, he's throwing something, and then there's a sound, and it makes sense. So all of a sudden, they are able to connect the dots, and they are understanding art.
Wow, it's very cool. I can't wait to see one of these. I'm sure it will happen sometime.
Yes.
And, I was just thinking, one of the things, I was in India for a couple weeks, and then Nepal, right, and came back into the pandemic. But one of the concepts, there's so much Indian spirituality and music that just is so complex and blows me away. But this concept of nod, that the underlying reality of everything, the sound. But there's kind of a space aspect to that too,
right.
It seems to me, so everything is sort of coming from nothing in a sense. Maybe this whole pandemic is kind of our society's time to have a little bit of a space for some of these things to percolate a little bit, and
so.
hopefully we come out with a much better thing on the other side. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, I hope so too. Well, at least it gets people talking.
Yeah.
You see interviews all over. You see people sharing, connecting with each other. With Zoom, I did find that, you can reach anybody now.
Yes.
And you could last year, but it was just too,
Yeah, and have meaningful,
right.
Intelligent interactions with people, even though you're thousands of miles away. It's remarkable, really. It's very cool. So I did take we did a couple of courses, so I want to tell people that, you are available to do that. They can take an Effortless Mastery session with you.
They can always email me, and they can study either with Kenny or with me. Kenny is usually very busy, so.
Yeah, and it's at what would be the place for anybody to try to catch up with you? Email or website or something?
Yeah, I do have a website. It's vivienneaerts.com. But I'm sure you can put it in the description wherever you'll find it. It's just my name.com.
Aerts. Yeah, that's how they can
and
track
then
you down.
Vivienne, it's all letters twice.
I guess thinking about it, it is all letters twice.
Yeah, so there's no A, there's just E. It's the French way. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks very much for taking the time to do this. It's just fascinating. Good to hear more about your history, how you got into this, where things may go. I'm very hopeful and optimistic, and thank you for doing all these things. I can't wait to see one of those shows, and I'm going to continue to try to show up to some of Kenny's forum classes. So thank you for that as well.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just curious where this all goes. Well, first, I totally forgot. My upcoming project, since there's this pandemic, is making a new album like everybody else. But then I was thinking, and actually you're the first, well, I told some people, but not like in public.
Right.
So you have the news.
The scoop? I got the scoop
You have
here.
the scoop.
Yeah.
I'm going to make an album with 100 women that supports 100 women in Congo that make the chocolate. So with every CD, obviously you get a bar chocolate, and I will put it in the mail. But those 100 female artists, they can all just send me stuff, obviously, because we have internets and computers. And then I'll morph it into a creation. And those 100 women will support those women in Congo, in Virunga State Park, of my favorite brand of chocolate, Original Beans. They make this amazing chocolate from different places in the world. But this project they have in Congo is supporting 400 female cocoa farmers. So I was thinking about making the album, Women for Women.
I think that's really so awesome,
Cool,
Vivienne.
no?
I mean, I love
you
chocolate.
got the scoop.
I love chocolate, love women, love music. What else could you? Oh yeah, and right on cue, my bird clock goes off. So love birds too.
You have a bird clock.
Yeah, I love it.
That's really the best.
It's sort of famous in podcast world here, but
Really?
yeah. So that's a great project. I mean, more music.
Yeah, since we don't have chocolate shows and we cannot go out, let's just make an album and change the world. I thought you should
more
know.
power to women, more power to music,
Yeah.
No problem, we can get it done. So thank you very much, Vivienne, really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society. We talk with musicians and others about the power of music and how we can use music to help create a better world. Please check out our website, www.planetarygigs.org, for information about some of the organizations promoting music and musicians, resources about the power of music, books, movies, articles, including new research on music and the brain. We welcome your support. The Planetary Gig Society is a Section 501c3 charitable organization, and you can donate on the website. You also can receive a free email signature block demonstrating your support for Planetary Gig Society. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Planetary Gigs. And we want to thank fabulous musician and teacher Eric Weinberg of Little Eric Studios for the Planetary Gig Talk music titled Chill Kid, It's Saul. So please check out Planetary Gig Talk on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Subscribe and hear all the upcoming episodes. Thanks very much.